We're here. We're in the pool. Can the grunt hack it, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to Dram Talk.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Brad, and today we'll be looking at the Whisky Club membership in Australia.
And we'll be reviewing the Glen Grant 15-year-old Batch Strength First Edition, as well as GlenAllachie 15. So our two drams today, they are both editions released by the Whisky Club, which is Australia's largest whisky subscription service.
Yeah, and I think super important to mention, no sign-up fee.
There is no sign-up fee, yes. If anyone wondering, straight off the bat, like they're not sponsoring us,
unfortunately. But
yeah,
you know,
they're not sponsoring us yet.
We'll get into contact. Maybe we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see how we go.
Yeah, they haven't provided us with any discounts or free bottles yet.
Yet, but you know, we'll see. We'll see
if they enjoy this review.
If they enjoy this review, we'll see.
Yeah. So anyway,
let me just scratch off all the bad things I'm going to say. All right, let's keep going.
So I think it's a very fitting episode to have. Episode 2 basically serves as a second introductory podcast because I personally don't think we'd be doing a podcast or I'd have as wide a whiskey collection as I do if it wasn't for the Whisky Club.
Yeah, no, that's so true, and I think that's the same for me as well. Like I wouldn't have nearly as many bottles as I'd have, and even though like I'm really relatively new to joining the Whisky Club, and my first bottle is actually the Glen Grant, which we're reviewing today, but that's obviously more as well because I've developed my palate to like a level where I'm kind of confident in what I know, you know, what I like and what I know like I'm not gonna like. So if there's a bottle that maybe I'm not too keen on, I know I'm not gonna jump in on that, and that's probably just because as well I've just been mooching off Daniel's subscription for the past year. But basically, you know, I got my own now, so you can leave me alone.
Yeah, I should be able to preserve my bottles for a little bit longer than they have been. So the story behind this happened so I've always been interested in whiskey and Scotch particularly, but as a young uni student, it wasn't a habit or a preference you could afford to maintain. Now, given that I've been working basically full time, I had a little bit more disposable income, and that coincided with a trip to Scotland last year. I'm half Scottish. My mum's from Scotland. So over there, I was like riding high with Scottish pride and just embracing all of the distilleries. However, I was kind of just going along with the ride. We went to a place called the Scotch Whisky Experience in Edinburgh, which if you're ever over in Scotland, would highly recommend. It's really great. And they've actually got the world's largest private whiskey collection.
Oh.
So this guy collected over 3,300 bottles, I believe. Not just single malts, like a lot of blends, but all Scotch.
Okay.
But yeah, he hadn't opened any of the bottles, and so I don't know why. I don't know if people just started giving him Scotch as a gift and he was too polite to tell them he didn't like it. But none of the bottles are being opened, which is amazing. It shows amazing restraint, but also why? Like it's there to be drunk.
Yeah, no, we believe that here. Just if you got the bottle, drink the damn thing, honestly.
Anyway, so during that Scotch Whisky Experience, they kind of run you through the different Scottish regions and then you select a region to try from. And I chose Islay because before going, I knew I liked the smoky whiskies. I knew I liked Lagavulin, but beyond that, I didn't really know too much about Islay and the region anyway. So going through Scotland, we went to some of the more popular distilleries. We visited Glenfiddich, Glenlivet, Tomerton, and...
Was that when you went to Talisker?
No, I went to Talisker.
That was a separate time.
Yeah. So visited all of these distilleries, mainly around Speyside, and then came back with 2 bottles. I had a bottle of the Lagavulin Distillers Edition and a bottle of the Glen Scotia. I went to the Glen Scotia distillery as well.
Okay, there you go. There it is. There it is.
So I had the intention of purchasing more and wanting more, but every time you go to the bottle shop and you look at the range...
But you know, customs.
Basically, yeah. That pesky alcohol limit. So coming back, going to the bottle shop, just had no idea what to pick or what to buy, and because it can be pretty intimidating if you only know a handful of brands, and then when you see the entire range that's available as well as all of the different variations from a distillery.
No, yeah, definitely, and that's like your experience as well. It's like really similar to mine, like going into Scotch. Like I went to Scotland, really just drank a lot while I was there, and I think at the time the tour guide that we had when we went around, he really like introduced me to Scotch, and I started like just drinking then and kind of just fell in love with it. But even at that time, it was just so whatever you say is good, I'll drink it. And I won't question it, if anything. Yeah. But really coming back, I guess, to where we're heading now into the discussion, where it's like the Whisky Club. Like we've been able to just try so many different bottles from different regions and see how the flavors within those regions themselves are so different and similarities between them as well.
Yeah, so I found the Whisky Club basically just by Googling it because I knew maybe that's a path I'd go down because I had a friend who was subscribed to a Whisky Club previously. It wasn't this one. They mainly focused on independent bottles bottling, but they weren't the brands you'd find in the shops and on the shelves. So yeah, I looked it up and found the Whisky Club, and it was because it seems to be the biggest one. I think they've been around since 2014 as far as their backlog of Whiskies of the Month show.
Yeah.
So they've been around for a while, and they're quite popular. So they were one of the first searches, and I joined up just to experiment. And I think they really had me with their first whiskey, which was the Tobermory 12. Now, that's very unique to me because that kind of ticked a lot of the boxes. As I think I mentioned in the first episode, I'm a huge fan of whiskey from a bunch of the different islands around Scotland. And I haven't heard of Tobermory or the Isle of Mull before. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then reading the notes, reading the description, they basically just sold me on that. And so I was like, okay, great. And Tobermory isn't a bottle that's readily available here. The one that is from their distillery is Ledaig. So
I've commonly seen that around,
Yeah, so that's Tobermory's peated whiskey. Tobermory 12, the one that I've got, is their unpeated one. So I think we'll revisit that in a later episode when we get a bottle of Ledaig as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, they basically had me on that, signed up, and then just continued from there. And they offered a range that they're not going to give you one that you can just go down to the shops and buy, usually.
Yeah,
they're either offering ones that aren't easily available to Australians, or they're offering ones that are specifically purchased by them. So maybe they have a deal with the distillery in the case of their bottling with Ben Ray or Loch Lomond. They are both bottles that I think the Whisky Club purchased a cask, and they've been bottled specifically for them. So the bottle has the Whisky Club crest on it, and it says it's been bottled specifically for the Whisky Club. And then they offer ones that either haven't reached Australia. In the case of the GlenAllachie 15, which we have here, it's joining GlenAllachie's range, but it's not available yet.
Yeah, or even in the more depressing case, the Offerman edition of Lagavulin, which sadly is still not on the shelves here for us.
Yeah, so that's one of my purchases I'm most proud of with them. Like, they brought that out, I think that was in November last year, November 2019. And I was so glad. I didn't realize it was one of the things, like, it didn't stick in my mind that that's what I was buying, like that it was related to Nick Offerman, who was Ron Swanson in Parks and Recreation. So I bought it and arrived, and then it clicked. And I was like, I should have got 2 bottles.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so disappointing for me is because I remember it was around that time as well where I was considering joining it, and then I just kind of put it off, and I was like, you know what, this might just be a small phase you're going through, just ignore it. But then now every time I see that bottle on your shelf, I'm like, do I have room in my bag? I might just take it.
Yeah, so as I said, I've been a member for exactly a year now, where September 2020, so this was the time of the year that I received my first bottle from them. I haven't purchased every Whisky of the Month.
Nor have I. So
I have opted out either because it didn't fit with what I really wanted, or there was a bottle I knew at the shops. Because as I got exposed to a wide range of whiskies through the Whisky Club, started becoming a little bit more familiar with the different names, the different regions, the different tasting notes. And then when I went to the shops, it was like a whole new world. Like, I started to notice a lot more things and be a lot more confident in making decisions about what I liked and what I wanted to buy.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so great about the Whisky Club is that it just gives you that information so that when you actually go to the shops, you're making an informed purchase as opposed to one where you're walking in there and you're making, I guess, like a visual decision.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like, the whole process of receiving the bottle, it's just exciting because they announce the Whisky of the Month, then it comes to the first weekend of the month where you have the choice whether to opt out if you don't want to buy it or double up if you want to. And they've recently installed a promotion where they're promoting local Australian distilleries.
Yeah, which is so good.
Yeah, it's amazing. So they've given you the option of the Whisky of the Month, but then they're also adding a supplementary Australian whiskey, which you can choose whether or not to buy.
And I think what's also important to note as well, like, it's not just Aussie whiskies. You can find like really other rare, hard to find bottles as well. Like in the case of the Kubla Khan, which we'll probably come to in another episode.
Because they've gotten such a good name for themselves, they also host virtual tastings with the head distillers from these distilleries. So they had a head distiller from both the Glenlivet as well as the Glen Grant, and they held separate tastings so that if you purchase that bottle of the month, you could attend and listen to the people who actually made the bottle describe.
Yeah, and I think that's what's so good. It's like the whiskey is like a huge perk of being part of the club, but you get so many other things as well that you probably wouldn't necessarily be exposed to.
And when the whiskey arrives, they give you this...
You just get like a sheet.
Yeah, sheet that has a description of the whiskey as well as...
the color, the nose, the palate, and the finish. So it really helps you on your process when you're going through and tasting the whiskey as well. So you actually have some notes to refer to.
I think that's what's great, and that's what really has driven us to delve into identifying these things, because when you're given this thing, you're like, oh, now I'm excited to open the bottle and try it. I'm like, am I getting this? Am I getting this? I know when I first started, I wasn't like, I was like, I don't know. Okay, sure. If you say that's what it is, I'll believe you. And then as we went further on, as we tried a lot more, I'm like, I definitely get that. I know what you're talking, like I can see what you're talking about. And that's kind of just aided in our overall experience of whiskey whiskey in general.
Yeah, so I think maybe that's enough on the Whisky Club. Let's get into the whiskies from the Whisky Club. So let's
Enough talk. I'm
enough
getting
talk.
thirsty.
Yeah, so let's start with the Glen Grant here.
Do you want to just run us through what this bottle is, why it was one of their whiskies of the month?
Yeah, right. So this Glen Grant bottle here, it's one of the world's most highly awarded single malts. It was crowned the best single malt scotch aged 11 to 15 years in Jim Murray's 2020 Whiskey Bible, and it was awarded a coveted double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits competition.
Damn, son.
Yeah, so I guess we're in the presence of royalty here. And the whiskey itself, it was made by Dennis Malcolm, who's the longest serving master distiller in Scotland. He was actually born at the Glen Grant distillery in 1946.
To be born and raised in a distillery.
I know, right? Jesus Christ. I mean, I kind of wish I was, but hey, I think my affinity with whiskey, maybe in a past life, who knows? And I think what's important as well, like how we go back to saying you can get like these opportunities to see rare bottles and bottles you wouldn't necessarily see in the shops. Like they go on to mention that it's really the only opportunity to taste an official bottling from one of the world's best distilleries in a more natural form. So it's at 50% ABV, non-chill filtered and natural color. And of course, exclusive to the club.
Yeah, this is one that the more you read about it, the more I look at the bottle, I don't know if I'm regretting my decision to opt out for this month. I guess we'll have to see. Let's open her up and give it a try. So let's try and answer the question. Can the Grant hack it? So as Brad mentioned, 50% ABV.
It states it's non-chill filtered and natural color, but unfortunately it doesn't say that on the label or the bottle itself.
Right, yeah, but it is 15 years. It is from Speyside. What casks was it aged in?
Ex-bourbon cask.
Ex-bourbon casks. Okay, so it's the color you'd expect from the bourbon, that kind of honey caramelly color. It's just interesting to put it next to the GlenAllachie, which is 15 years as well, and that is like a very deep burnt caramel. So they're the same age, they're drastically different colors, and that goes to show if you can put two bottles that have an age statement side by side in different casks, you can see the influence that a cask has on them.
Yeah, just looking at these two bottles in front of us, you definitely see it.
Okay, so let's go on to the nose of the Glen Grant. What are we picking up?
So they're saying notes of citrus fruit, lemon meringue, vanilla, toffee, and Maltesers. I definitely get vanilla, and on the nose, it's so sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet, but I am getting that citrusy note. So I do know what they mean about like the sugary lemon. I'm definitely picking that up.
Yeah, it's really sweet, and it's really inviting. I'd say it's like, this for me, it's like a really summery dram.
Right, yeah.
You know, it's one that, you know, maybe you're by the pool, kick your feet up. It feels like it's just that type of dram.
It's one you can enjoy relaxing on an afternoon. It does really fit that vibe.
So, and on the palate here, they're telling us we should expect a syrupy, viscous mouthfeel, chewy with sugar and spices, pears, tangerines, dried apricots, malt, and vanilla. So all these notes, so typical of a Speyside whiskey.
Yeah, so we're just going to let it open up in the glass for about 15 minutes.
Yeah, and I think we have mentioned that in our first episode. Can't remember. Maybe we did. Maybe we didn't. Maybe the whiskey was talking.
Yeah.
But we usually let our drams here sit out for a minute for every year it was in the cask. So we're going to give this one about 15 minutes or so. So yeah, while we're waiting for this one to open up, let's just discuss, you know, how should whiskey be served, right?
So this is a discussion that I think we do need to preface by stating we have our preferences, you may have yours. No one can tell you what you'll enjoy or how to drink your whiskey. We're going to tell you what we think is the best way to get the full experience out of whiskey.
What's really important in that, bold, what we think. Don't crucify us if you think, well, you're telling me something that is not exactly right. Well, this is what we think, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we're here to have a dram, and we're going to talk about a lot of things related to whiskey. And given the fact that we're putting the effort to make podcasts and we're spending a decent amount of money buying whiskeys, we want to get like the full experience of the whiskey. So if you enjoy a whiskey and soda or whatever, you just like the taste of it mixed with a beverage, like
go for it.
Go for it. Yeah, we can't tell you how to drink or what you'd like. Yeah. But yeah, as I said, we like to spend our money on whiskeys. We like to explore the variety of them. And the best way to do that is the way we prefer, which we'll get into shortly.
Yes, I mean, the most common way I think whiskey is commonly served on the rocks. It's like really popular, most common when people are drinking blends or like a mixed thing, like an old fashioned, but also it's probably the one that you mainly see in popular culture, right? It's like in a movie, someone's got a nice heavy rocks glass. And I mean, who doesn't love a rocks glass?
They are great. Like, I know we'll get into the types of glasses probably at a later episode because they are quite varied and complex, but just the feeling of that solid rocks glass in your hand and then being able to swirl the whiskey around, it does help you fit into the popular culture image that whiskey has created for itself.
Right, yeah, and it's like that. It adds that, I guess, that sophistication or that the image of that anyway. Then I think like the next way is straight up.
Sorry, just before you go into straight up.
Okay, yeah.
I would say like just from what I know, from what I've read, from what we've experienced, the only problem with going on the rocks is when you add ice, not only does it dissolve, and depending on the kind of ice cubes you get, you can't control the rate at which the water dissolves into the whiskey. So from the moment you start it to the moment you end, you're going to get a drastically different drink. There's no consistency. There's no ability to savor and experience and I guess keep a record of what it is
and I think
you're
that's
getting from it.
That's probably the most important thing there with that rocks glass, or on the rocks anyway, is that you have no control.
Not only that, like as whiskey gets cold, the chemical reaction that takes place in there makes a lot of the sugars harder to detect, which means you can't identify a lot of the flavors that you could if you were just drinking it neat.
Yeah. So back onto straight up before I was so rudely interrupted. No, I kid. I missed a valid point there, so that's on me. So straight up, this is shaken with ice, then poured into a glass. Honestly, I've never heard of this term, or I don't think I've ever seen it happen either.
Can't say I have. As we mentioned, you do have that same issue of cooling the whiskey down, affecting the flavor, even though you are getting... I mean, like, that way, if you don't enjoy whiskey at room temperature, you're still able to experience in the most minimum unadulterated form as possible. You just get to have it cold, but just be aware that does affect the different flavors you're going to be able to detect.
Yeah, so now the next one we have here is whiskey with water. So the amount can vary, it could be a drop, a spoonful, or really however much you want to dilute the whiskey by. And some people usually use it as a form to bring that ABV down to maybe closer to 40%. So say if you have like a cask strength bottle and you just want to bring it down to a percentage that you're more able to palate, right?
Yeah.
So the final way we have here is neat. So that's the Dram Talk way, right? That's no ice, no water. And I think we probably should mention, even though we'll get to it in a later episode, in a Glen can.
Yep, the Glen can glass, which is that tulip-shaped glass.
Yeah, so neat's recommended, but it's not always something you're able to jump into straight away, especially if you're not accustomed to drinking lots of alcohol or just drinking spirits really in general. So most enthusiasts prefer neat, or after it's sat in a while, or they've already given it a taste and a nose, adding a drop of water to see how that changes the flavors there. So we prefer to do a nose and a taste before and after a drop of water.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what most enthusiasts like to do anyway, because you just want to see and note how everything's changing and mingling together.
Yeah, some people may have issues. Some whiskey snobs, they want it neat and they don't think any water should be added under any circumstances. But I think what we have found through our tastings and our experience is by not doing that, you're essentially backing yourself into a corner because you're missing out on some really good opportunities, which even in this episode, and we'll get to later, like adding water can do incredible things to a whiskey. Even just a drop, just like 5 mils, like whatever can fit on a teaspoon. And I mean, you can judge it yourself. Like you just accommodate alcohol volume, how much you've got left in your dram.
Exactly.
We've often found times where we've been drinking, forget to add water. It's like, oh, now we're almost gone.
Yeah, but then, in that case, you just pour another one.
Exactly. The sacrifices we have to make to experience it to its full capacity.
Yeah, and I think, like how you mentioned before, like if you know you can't handle anything over 50%, you'll probably just dial it back to an amount, maybe like 46, 43%. Right? Now, I think it's really important, like we've mentioned it before we got into the segment here, is just drink whiskey the way you enjoy it. No one can tell you what you like. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, you want to have the best experience possible when you're drinking whiskey. And no one can tell you how you can have that best experience other than yourself.
Yeah, the only thing I would mention on that point as well is if you're still trying to mix whiskey that is, like $100 a bottle with Coke, but if you're doing that, you're basically getting the same result as if you were to buy a $40 blend and mixing it with Coke. It's like you're still essentially getting the same outcome and spending $60 more.
Yeah, I think maybe we might do an episode on that. We might maybe mix an Isla with a Coke, see how that goes. Maybe mix a blend with a Coke. It'll hurt us because we don't normally do that. Yeah. But we'll do it for you.
I hope we don't receive death threats. I mean, like most of them would probably be written by me beforehand, knowing we're coming up to that.
I mean, who doesn't love an Ardbeg and Coke? But like I said, we'll do it for you.
I died a little inside.
We'll do it for you.
Yep. All in the name of science.
All right. So I think we've given our drams here enough time to open up. So let's get into it. Let's get into the Glen Grant 15. Can it hack it? So I think It's definitely opened a lot more. I'm actually getting a lot more of the sweetness now. The sweetness was strong before. It's even stronger now. And I could even say I'm getting honey.
Interesting. Yeah, I can pick up the honey underneath. If anything, I would say the sweetness is almost dulled for me. Like,
Oh, okay.
the citrus is coming across a lot stronger. Where it was a very sugary, lemony meringue sweetness, it's now a strong lemon scent above the sugar. The sugar's still there. I'm not doubting that. It's just not as strong as it was when I first poured it.
Right, so onto the palate now. So for me on the palate, they do mention syrupy and viscous. Definitely that. This coats your mouth with sweetness. It's just, I'm really enjoying this. Like, I'm at a loss for words at how much I'm enjoying this.
Yeah, likewise, I can see why it's won a lot of accolades. It is a very complex dram, but not an overwhelming dram.
No,
you're
not
not
at all.
overwhelmed by the flavors and sensations and experiences. It's guiding you through them, and they're
Yeah.
coming at you from different directions, hitting different notes, and it's working really well.
No, it definitely is. Like the sugar and the spices, everything really blends together really well on the palate.
Okay, I'll walk through a lot of the individual things as we sit with it, but what I'm immediately getting is almost like a baklava. Like, I'm getting that sticky, sweet, sugary syrup, as well as like the filo pastry.
Yeah, I can see that. Because definitely on the finish, I get that strong pastry note. And I don't know if that's maybe attributing to maybe a nutty note. I think that was definitely a really good association there because you get that nuttiness, you get the pastry, and you get the honey as well, which are all key components of baklava in itself, right?
Yeah.
This is a really good dram. Like I'm looking at our bowl of water here, and I don't know if I want to add it, but we're gonna have to.
Yeah, we built it up before saying you're backing yourself into a corner by not adding water, so let's not be
I know,
hypocrites.
I'm looking at that corner in the room, and I don't mind being backed into it. But
It is a thoroughly enjoyable place to be.
yeah, this is a good one.
Yeah, I keep having to remind myself we're recording a podcast. You're going to have to walk people through what you're tasting and not just sit there and enjoy it. Because it is, I mean, like, it fits really well with what you were saying earlier. It's one you can just sit back, relax, and just enjoy.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, the color we did mention before, golden color. They call it here pale gold. Definitely that.
Yeah, almost like the color of honey.
Yeah, definitely that. Color honey. All right, so going in, I'll be adding a teaspoon of water now. So for me, with the water, the honey note really jumps at the front now. It's honey, honey, honey.
Yep. Adding the water definitely has really sent the citrus note right to the back and brought the honey note to the forefront. Also picking up some spices, some like nutty spices.
Yeah, there's spices now a lot more prevalent in the whiskey itself. And when I'm saying spices, for me, it's more of those baking spices.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like those baking spices. So you still have that sweetness there in the back. Like the water's, it's doing good things to this whiskey. It's not disturbing it or harming it in any way, I don't think.
Yeah, I usually can have a pretty safe ruling on what I prefer. Whiskey neat, whiskey with a little bit of water, or just enjoying the experience of both. And for this one, definitely enjoy the experience of both. It changes it enough for it to be noticeable and enjoyable, but not enough that it feels like you're drinking an entirely new whiskey.
Yeah, and I think with the water as well, the maltiness comes out a lot more. Like the actual malt itself, it comes a lot more on the palate now with the water.
Yeah, like experience is different for everyone. For me, the finish wasn't thick and long before. Adding the water as it hit the mouth, you do feel that it has lost a bit of consistency. It does feel a little bit...
It's a little more jagged, I think.
Yeah, but the finish, it does seem to fill the mouth up as well. Like I think I feel the flavors building up in my mouth long after it's done. So I think it's a good medium to long finish and not too strong. Like it's sitting there enough that you can still pick it up and you're still getting like occasional scents or flavors, but it's not overpowering and too long.
Yeah, no, it's a good one on the finish, definitely. Like I'd say medium to long as well. And it's just there. It's just present and it's not overpowering and it's not too dull or anything. It's just there. Back to the palate notes as well. Chewy with sugar and spices, pears, tangerines, dried apricots, malt, and vanilla. And the finish, they're saying a little nutty on the finish with delicate notes of soft fruit, malt, and honey.
Okay, so yeah, I could associate the apricot, even like more of a dried apricot is what I'm getting. And as you said, the malt, I know you brought it up earlier, but it does feel like the inside of a Malteser malt. Like that kind of the biscuity type of malt. That's definitely what's coming across. Yeah, I am slightly regretting not buying this bottle.
Yeah, no, it's a really good one. I'm really happy I opted in on this one. It's really good.
Definitely a worthwhile experience. Just a final note on the Glen Grant. I think it's very good, and it's definitely coming across as a 50% alcohol whiskey. Like,
Yeah,
you
definitely.
can really feel that. So if it is hitting you a bit strong, adding water will not hurt it.
No, definitely not. No.
It changes it, but
In a pretty good way.
in a pretty good way, yeah. You're not going to lose anything by the addition of water. So I think it's worth exploring in multiple ways, both
Yeah.
as it stands neat, as well as with the addition of like a tiny bit of water.
Yeah, so can the Grant hack it? I think it can.
I would say he could, yeah.
Yeah,
this,
but-
this Glen Grant could hack it.
Yeah, but you're going to have to stick around after Glennalacki before we give you our ratings.
Keeping you in suspense.
Right, so we're back with the Glennalacki 15 here. Daniel, tell us about this dram here.
So this was the Whisky Club's Whisky of the Month for May of 2020. And this is an interesting one. It did note that GlenAllachie won double gold at the San Francisco World Spirits Competition.
Oh, another member of the royal family.
So yeah, we're got multiple award winners here. Now, this is not a special release as far as I can tell. From what I have been able to look into and find out, the GlenAllachie 15 is going to be a new addition to GlenAllachie's range. It just
Okay.
is not currently available in Australia.
Okay, that's good to see because, a little bit behind the curtain here, we have tried this before and I remember really enjoying it. So that's good to see that it's actually going to be part of that.
Yeah, and this is another great one, I think, that really represents probably my whiskey experience, and I guess a lot of people's. When I got this one, honestly, I was not intending to buy it. I was all intention to opt out. I think we just had a very busy weekend. I forgot to,
Oh, forgot to opt out.
in quotation marks, I forgot to opt out. And then
Classic.
it arrived, and I was uncertain when it came to this one. I mean, I knew it won awards, but I was very in the mind space of Isla peated whiskies, wanting to chase that peat train, like wanting to get the really smoky whiskies.
Yeah, and like we mentioned in the Wee Beastie review, like we are full on peat heads.
Yeah, absolutely. Just cannot get enough of it. So getting this one meant I had
Couldn't
to
buy anything
forfeit
else that month?
purchasing.
Yeah.
Yeah, buying something else that month. It was a slight disappointment. When I tried it, I was still unsure. However, I gave it a second chance. I watched a review and I did a tasting along with that review, and there was some similar notes, some different notes, but that was really the first time I sat down and had someone guide me through a review of what they were tasting and what they were experiencing, as well as with the addition of water. And when I did this, when I kind of gave this dram the time to thoroughly explore and express itself, it really did that. It expressed itself to me in a big way, and I have really enjoyed every dram I've had of this one since.
I know, that's good. No, it's good. I'm glad you said express. I thought you were going to say it exposed itself to you in a big way. I was like, whoa, a bit too much there.
You did, but that's for my therapist.
So on the color here, it says sunset bronze. How poetic, how beautiful. And that captures it exactly.
It's very fitting. It is a very, very deep red.
Yeah, and I mean, sunset bronze, a lot better than what I was going to say, which is burnt caramel.
Burnt caramel. Yeah.
Yeah, sunset bronze. Stick with that. Now, on the nose, they're saying we're going to expect raisins, butterscotch, and sweet spices. So let's go. Let's see.
I mean, like, initially didn't even have time to bring it up to my
Yeah,
nose, but that
yeah, I had the
butterscotch
same-
is coming across very strong.
Same reaction. That butterscotch is mainly all that I'm getting, and I didn't even have to bring it up. Just straight up, bang, butterscotch. What's the alcohol percentage on this one here?
So this one is 46%.
Okay. On the nose, I'd say I would have thought it would be a bit higher than that off the nose because you're getting a bit of that burn.
Yep, it does come across as a stronger alcohol on the nose. Just to also cover all bases here, it is natural color, it is non-chill filtered, and it has an age statement. So this is an integrity
All on the
bottling.
label as well. Love to see it.
Just ticking all the boxes on the label, on the bottle. So it's hard to say, especially for Australians. It looks like this may become, as I mentioned earlier, part of their permanent line. So far, we have the 10, 12, and 18 available in stores. So I don't know if this is going to be replacing one of them or just in addition to them. The GlenAllachie 10 is actually, it's at cask strength. So that one is more expensive, but it does come in at 58.2%.
Well, we might need to hunt that bottle down.
So that is, I'm very intrigued by that bottle now. So I'd say if this does arrive, it's either going to be in addition to the 12 and 18,
Okay.
or it's going to replace the 12.
Yeah. Yeah, if they did replace one, I'd imagine the 12 would probably be the one to boot, so it gives a bit more of an average, like 12, 10, 15, 18. But if it adds itself into the range as opposed as detracts from something else, that's great as well. So with just a little more time in the glass, I do get those little hints of raisin, but it's like very small. It's not like overpowering or anything. But that butterscotch is still very, very powerful for me.
Yeah, I can see what you mean by the raisins. I'm also getting across that spice, and it's
Yeah, and I think-
reminiscent of those mixes you can buy that have the
Yep.
dried fruits and nuts in it.
Yeah, and I think the spice may be attributed more to that burn that we got initially when we were saying that maybe alcohol ethanol burn. So let's jump into the palate here. So they are saying we should expect a rainbow of sweet spices, raisins and butterscotch, which develops into banana, orange peel and dark chocolate. So just a little preface into Daniel and myself. We mentioned it before on the pod. Chocolate notes, a little difficult for us to pick up in whiskey.
Chocolate is hard to identify because I can never really get where they're coming from with it. What are they getting? Are they getting the sweet milky chocolate, or are they getting like the cocoa? But what comes across for me immediately in trying this is I'm getting the sweet spices, I'm getting the butterscotch,
Yes, definitely butterscotch.
and at the end I'm getting a very slight tang that may be reminiscent of what they're calling the orange peel. Hard to say at the moment.
I
but
get more of the banana, to be honest.
more of the banana. Interesting. I'll revisit that note once we've added a bit of water, because I think that's where it really opened up for me.
Yeah, and I think more so on those notes of dark chocolate. Like if I'm stretching, I'd say the dark chocolate is more so the bitterness of dark chocolate as opposed to the flavor of chocolate itself.
I would agree. I would say like even combining it with the orange peel, like getting the dark chocolate and orange,
Yes.
I could stretch it and say that's what I'm getting. May have to explore the chocolate notes in a lot of other whiskeys first to
Yeah, no,
really work
definitely.
out what it is we're
Definitely
identifying.
would have to do that.
That's all in the name of the podcast. It's not an excuse for us to go and buy more whiskeys.
So now the finish, they're saying should be a medium finish, slightly dry and nutty, maybe akin to peanut brittle with chocolate and fresh sweet fruitiness. I'd definitely say medium length is appropriate and slightly dry. It's very dry.
It's very dry, and I get where they're coming from with the peanut brittle. I think that's very apt, especially I've never made peanut brittle, but
Neither
I can
have I.
imagine when you get it and you've got kind of like the really dark, burnt, sticky caramel bits underneath it, that is coming across very strongly for me.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. I can definitely see that. So let's jump in. Let's add a teaspoon of water.
This was another one of those drams where I looked down and realized how fast I was going through the glass, and we
Yeah.
do need to add the water.
Yeah, fitting we had two of those on the one episode. On the nose, the raisin note, a lot stronger.
Yeah, I think the water has subdued the butterscotch, and
Yeah,
the
definitely.
raisin note and the spices come across a little bit more. It's hard to say. I think for me, what's really expressing itself is it'd be hard for me to identify the specific spices. I'd say cinnamon, cloves, but,
Okay,
but
yeah.
it's not like I'm smelling each individual one. It's just like the amalgamation of all of them.
Yeah, I think it's more where you'd say you're picking up the spices, then now I guess you'd be naming off the spices that
Yeah.
not necessarily each of those individually, but like you
Yeah,
said,
it's-
a mix of all of that.
A mix of all of them, or even I would almost equate it to like a mulled wine, but it's
Okay.
in a very
Yeah.
dry sense because it's a very
Yeah.
dry dram. Though, like whatever spices they add to mulled wine, I could imagine them.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that we've just paired these two together in an episode because we've gone from the Glen Grant, which is such a viscous, syrupy feel and a finish, to this, which is just dry. But it works. This really works as well.
This really works. Okay, we'll go into the palate after adding the water to it now. Now, what amazed me about this is how much the water changed the mouthfeel.
Yes.
For me, it comes across a lot more.
Would you say it's a lot more full?
It's a lot more full. Yeah, that's I was trying to think of a more eloquent way to describe it, but it's
Yeah.
just a lot more full. And what I'm getting is it's almost like I'm eating banana bread.
Yes, 100%. It was my turn to have the loss of words there, and I was just thinking, what is this? What is this? And you said banana bread. There it is. That's what it is. And it's so interesting to see how the water's really filled out the gaps that were present in the dram without the water.
Yep.
So it's really interesting to see that. And it goes back to like that little segment we had before where adding that water in a lot of cases, it can really be a real positive change to the whiskey. It may not always necessarily be something that's negative.
Yeah, it pays off in a big way. And I would say, like, to reflect back to what I initially introduced the GlenAllachie on, when I didn't have my mind open to experiencing all that this has to offer. And when I actually sat down, took the time, added the water, it was amazing how much it opened up to me. And I think since then, aside from when we've done tastings and on the pod now, where we compared what we were getting before and after, I've taken maybe 1 or 2 sips just to see how my palate has developed. And then I've added water straight away. Like, I think this is a dram where adding just a teaspoon of water drastically improves it.
Yeah, it benefits it so much. And I think this is one of those drams where I think, dare I say, I'd always add the water. I may not even necessarily go into it without the water. I might always add the water because I'm enjoying it so much more with that addition of that water. So with that, we've finished our glasses and let's get into the ratings here. So
let's discuss how we would rate these two very complex, very interesting, and I mean, not to give too much away, but really great drams.
Yeah, so
we've got a 1 to 10 scale. We tossed around a few ideas. We thought, can we do 4 to 7? Should we do 3.5 to 9? But I think we came back to 1 to 10.
I was a fan of the 3.5 to 9, but unfortunately we had to go with 1 to 10.
Yeah, we figured that had a little bit too much nuance for the early stages of our podcast.
Yeah, so maybe, 50 episodes in, scale's going to change. It's going to be 3.6 to 9.5.
That's when we'll get really granular about our whiskey ratings.
So our rating system as well here, like a lot of it comes from me seeing a lot of reviews on Reddit as well. And I really, I guess, use the scale that I've found there because I find it to be so apt to describe whiskey. So 1, that's binned it. Not even worth our time really, just in the bin.
2 would be, it's poor. We wouldn't consume it by choice.
3, it's multiple flaws, right? Multiple flaws in the whiskey. I mean, it's not necessarily bad.
4 is average. It's drinkable. There are other drams I'd rather, like if it was what you had and you offered it to me, I'd drink it, but I'm being polite.
5 is good. It's just fine.
6 is very good. It's a cut above.
7 is great. Well above average.
8 would be excellent, like a quite exceptional dram.
And 9 is incredible, an all-time favorite.
And 10 is just perfect. Like there is just nothing else to say. Perfect.
Yeah, and I think that's the quest on this podcast, right? Try to find that 10 dram.
I think once we do find that one, we just hang up the headphones and go home. Okay, so you brought the Glen Grant to the table. I brought the Glennalacki. So I'll rate the Glen Grant first, and then you can rate the Glennalacki first.
All right, go ahead.
I would rate the Glen Grant an 8.
Oh, it's very good. That's excellent.
I don't know if this is influenced by knowing the awards that it won, but for me, what it comes down to is the fact that I'm not a huge Speyside fan. I find them a little bit too sweet for my liking. I can drink them. Like, I'm not saying I can't. Like, they are really good and they have quite a wide variety, so I do like to explore them. But when it comes to buying a whiskey, I do prefer to go to the maritime, sea salty, smoky notes. But for the way this one presented itself and opened up and just the complexity in it, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And so I would say it is, quite exceptional and quite deserving of the awards that it won.
Yeah, for me as well. This is an 8. It's bloody good. It's excellent. There's not much more you can say about it because everything you mentioned, the complexity, it's all there. You get all your typical Speyside notes and they present themselves so well. Everything's married together so well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think, you can't be disappointed in this dram here.
No,
honestly,
definitely not.
Like, I can't find a reason to be disappointed in it, to be honest.
If you gave this to people, everyone would thoroughly enjoy it. I think the only thing that would be the downside for people, if they're new to Scotch or whiskey, would be the alcohol percentage. But that is by no means a fault of the whiskey. That, if anything, improves it for us.
Yeah, it improves it for us. And I think that high ABV could probably put people off trying this, but that high ABV is so well hidden in the dram itself. If you didn't tell me this was 50%, I probably would have thought this was maybe 43%.
Oh, absolutely. Like, it is just, it's masked, or I wouldn't say masked, but it's complemented by the flavors that present themselves to a point where, you don't notice it.
Yeah, 100%. So now onto the Glennalacki.
What would you rate that, Brad?
For me, it's a 7.5.
Okay, yep.
It's a 7.5. It's great. It's definitely well above average, but I can't give it an 8 because I don't enjoy it as much as the Glen Grant.
Interesting, yep.
So, I think that's probably played into my rating here, the fact that we've put these two side by side. They're not necessarily going head to head, but they are side by side. And I've drank the Glennalacki straight after the Glen Grant 15. And with that, it's a 7.5.
Okay, it's a little bit of a conflict for me because personally, as I was saying before, I don't have a large sweet tooth. So I do always prefer the drier, salty, smoky whiskies. So if I had the choice to drink between two of them, I would prefer the GlenAllachie. However, I do recognize...
Is that just bitterness because you opted out?
Shut up. However, I do recognize that the Glen Grant is a more superior dram. So while if I was given the choice, or if I had these two bottles on my shelf, I would probably always drink the GlenAllachie first because it suits my palate better. I would still probably have to rate it a 7.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'd have to rate it a 7. I think it is a really good dram. It is well above average. It is one that if I saw it on the shelf at some point in the future, I would buy it again, like without a doubt.
Oh yeah, if I saw this on the shelf, I would buy it. I'd definitely buy this.
But I just think it doesn't match the Glen Grant for its alcohol percentage as well as the complexity and the diverse range of flavors that I think just works so well.
And I'm the opposite. Like I do have a sweet tooth, so the Glen Grant suits my palate perfectly. And so I'll definitely probably end on that, saying that if you do have a sweet tooth, this Glen Grant 15, it's definitely for you.
Yeah, and if you're like me and you don't have so much of a sweet tooth and you do enjoy a range of spices, then the GlenAllachie is for you.
Yeah, that's probably more up your alley.
So I think that concludes our brief review of the Whisky Club, which I think for the two drams we've tried, while they might not be exclusive to the Whisky Club, they're definitely ones that we would not have been able to access had we not been members. And whether you may be able to get some of these in the future, it's up for debate. We don't really know when they're going to become available and if they're going to become available. However, as we mentioned at the start of the episode, there is a range of bottles you can get that the Whisky Club has worked alongside the distilleries with to produce that you're only going to be able to get once. So if you're into like experimental whiskies and want to try different things, whether you don't know where to start or whether you've been in the game for a long time and you're just looking for something new, I think it's got the option to suit you. And as we mentioned, there's really no lose to signing up.
There's no downside whatsoever. You get to participate in these virtual tastings as well. There's just endless positives.
There's no sign up fee and you can opt out. So you're not required to buy them. Like, as I said, like I've opted out for the past 3 months, I think. I'm still a member. I'm still given the opportunity to purchase new ones, but it's entirely up to you how you want to run your subscription.
Yeah, and necessarily, maybe you don't want the Whiskey of the Month, but maybe one of those add-ins or those additional whiskeys they have on offer might interest you a little bit more. And when we get to Kubakan in a later episode, you'll see, because that was one that Daniel acquired through the Whisky Club as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, like the range of Australian whiskies that they're increasing awareness about, like there are so many that I didn't even know about before we started. I only know about because of them. So we're really interested to start exploring Australian whiskey, and we will do in the future.
To sum everything up for us here, Whisky Club, go ahead, join it, do it, no downside.
Yeah, if you're a member of the club, contact us and let us know what your favorite bottle is that you've got, because chances are, if you've been a member over the past year, we've got a bottle here that we have tried. Interested to know your thoughts. If you've got opinions on either of the ones we have tried today, let us know. You can contact us via email at dramtalk.au@gmail.com.
Yeah, or you can come to Instagram, and that's Dram Talk Podcast.
Yes, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And I guess that wraps it up for tonight. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and we hope you tune in next week. Pour another dram!